This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sunday because Sunday is the day to stream on Sunday. Hope you're all doing well this morning. This beautiful Sunday morning. I guess it's beautiful depending on where you are. I've had some sound tweakings over the last several days, as many of you know who have attended my impromptu little sound test streams. I've made my adjustments. I hope it's better than it was. If you didn't notice a problem in previous streams, well, by all means, I'm glad for it. I've just got sensitive ears. What can I say? I'm very, very particular. A little bit of a perfectionist. Not too much, but, you know, is being a little bit of a perfectionist kind of like being a little pregnant? That could be so. I hope I'm coming through all right. Let me know in the chat if anything sounds a bit off kilter, and I will just have to grin and bear it, I suppose. But, yeah. So what's going on? Well, I wanted to talk about something that happened last week and its implications on the larger world of DEI. But before I get there, who is joining me this morning? This beautiful Sunday morning. Beachy Cogito, Noah Asensio, Dax Orion, Johnny Hellcat, Matt Barnes. Who else is here? Mike R. Somnamnyon Nation. Kiever Dam, thank you so much for the GoFundMes, which I will now pin to the top of the chat box. Please, if you have the opportunity, take a look at those GoFundMes for our friend Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. They, their friends, and their families could certainly use your generosity if you have it. Thank you. The Useless Cook, hello. Shady Grin himself, hello. Who else is here? Old Guy Gamer, and Funtime Bats, and Mike Savage, and Mr. Caveman 1993, Tall Person. Oh boy, everybody's coming here. Payar D. Bayar, Arc210, Ken Elliott, Megan Ring, and I think that's everybody I see. If I missed you, or if you're lurking, or if you're in the future, good morning. So what happened last week? Well, Monday last week were the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court of the United States in regards to affirmative action. A conservative group challenged the colleges to basically defend the idea of affirmative action and that it was not being racially discriminatory in a negative way, because as we know, there's always a positive spin on racial discrimination. And I started thinking about something that I'm not sure I ever voiced a connection to previously, but always seemed kind of, I guess, lizard brain instinctual to me. And that is DEI relies on the acceptance and permissibility of affirmative action. Now, why do I say that? Well, if you listen, and I was struck, I shouldn't have been, but I was struck by a lot of the language, terminology, and arguments made by the lawyers for the colleges, or at least the college, maybe it was just Harvard, in defense of affirmative action, because I kept hearing the exact same things that DEI advocates or diversity officers in corporations and such, the same arguments used. You know, and it was like, well, we don't really use race that much to assess people. No, it's really part about people's backgrounds and their lived experiences and on and on. And I'm like, okay, you know, if I hadn't made that connection before, or if I hadn't voiced it out loud, it's there. Because legally speaking, you cannot discriminate on the basis of race when it comes to employment, most times. And there's no wiggle room. You know, race, religion, country of origin, ethnicity, all these things, gender, out the door. You cannot use that as a factor in assessing someone for employment. And in the case of the affirmative action deal, you cannot use race when it comes to organizations that accept federal funding, like public colleges. But since affirmative action has been allowed to exist and operate for so many years, entities outside of colleges, I think, and people advocating for it, thus feel emboldened to use the same rhetoric and the same logic in pushing their own DEI practices, because it falls within that nebulous zone that affirmative action has created when it comes to your intent in using racial discrimination or gender discrimination or ethnic discrimination, in that you're trying to level the playing field by assuming that certain people of certain types need a helping hand because of what they are. So anyway, what does all this mean? Well, I think it means that if affirmative action is effectively outlawed by the Supreme Court, which I think there's a good possibility it may be, when the Supreme Court comes down on this case they just heard oral arguments for last week, I think there's a good possibility that affirmative action might be going bye-bye. And as soon as it does, I'm going to be very, very, very interested to see what effect that has on the entire DEI apparatus. Because once that umbrella of justification of affirmative action goes by the wayside, and again, I don't know if it will. The Supreme Court might have a very narrow ruling on the subject. I can't tell. I'm not a prognosticator like that. But if it does get completely axed, I think DEI might be in for some more trouble legally going forward. I think the arguments for its, well, quasi legality go bye-bye. So, okay, Keeverdam says sound quality. What's wrong with sound quality? Somebody tell me. Ambiguous statements in the chat make me very nervous. Let's see. Little roboting very slightly. Okay, I'm going to take off the music. I'm going to take off the music just for the heck of it. And hopefully that'll end things. Anyway, that's all preamble. That's all just my thoughts on recent events. But what do we have today? Well, originally I was going to look at the Chamber of Commerce of Maryland, the whole state of Maryland, who were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in their businesses and so on. But the audio quality of that presentation was so poor, I couldn't bring myself to even attempt to broadcast it. StreamYard is telling me that there's some connection issues. Oh, wonderful. Well, if I'm roboting, that might be why. Okay, well, we'll see how that goes. You guys let me know if I completely bottom out, won't you? Thank you. Anyway, in the replacement of that, I did find a recent summit from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which, as I was confused by when I was very young, is not actually an arm of the government, but just a privately run organization of businesses and business leaders. So it's not actually like part of Congress or something. Thank you, Matt Barnes. You're coming in clear. Don't freak out on me now. Well, freaking out is half the entertainment. But yeah, they had a summit on inclusive business, something like that, summit on inclusion. And so I was curious to know, from a quasi, not really official governmental branch organization thing with real business leaders, on the eve of the possibility of affirmative action going bye-bye, in a few months at least, what they have to say on the subject, what they have to report, and what they think. So we have a double feature. It's two different segments from this summit. One is on entrepreneurship and one is on workforce. And so we'll be taking those in their stride. Now, I have done the Chamber of Commerce a favor because their audio was off. It was out of sync. But I went to the effort of fixing it. So you're actually getting a better quality presentation from me than you are from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. There you go. Anyway, this clocks in altogether at just over 40 minutes. I'm going to go for an hour and a half in real time, maybe a little bit more if we need to go any further than that. But all that as long preamble. And also, good morning, Iskander Daffley, Tyrannus, Alexandrius, Tremere Lich, Brittany Holland, and anybody else that I missed that I can see. All right. Well, yeah, so I'm going to keep the background music off for the time being, see if that has a overall effect on the sound. And here we go.
I wish we could go earlier in the program. We have to follow. We have to follow the big boss, my boss. You have to follow the first undersecretary of MBDA. So, but we're up for it.
We are.
Because we're going to talk about entrepreneurship.
Oh, yay. Okay. You guys hear that okay? Let me know in the chat. Dax Orion, you spoil us. Hour and a half. Well, some might be sliding off their seats in a good way. Okay, well, with that also hype Spud Gun, if I didn't already say hello. Okay, thanks, Dax.
and equality within entrepreneurship.
Okay, this is Tom Sullivan, Vice President, Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Okay, so he's a USCC official.
I'm Tom Sullivan. I'm the Chamber's small business guy.
Oh, okay.
And I'm honored to be speaking with two officials from not small businesses, but businesses that are committed to bridging the inequality gap when it comes to creating entrepreneurship, creating diverse small businesses, and helping those small businesses grow. So,
okay, please do define what you mean by diverse. I mean, I can guess, but I always like to hear what the individual person's definition is. And how are they doing this? And who do they represent? Let's find out.
This is an exciting opportunity. I just introduced myself. We're going to go through a quick round of self-introductions and then just dive into how each of these incredible companies that are represented here today are making a commitment to close the equity divide.
Okay.
Jackie Taylor, very nice to be here today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm a partner in Ernst & Young in our government and public sector practice.
Ooh, Ernst & Young. I know the name. I don't know what they do.
I also serve as the executive sponsor for our Entrepreneur Access Network, and I lead the efforts in Atlanta, and I was a former leader of the New Jersey efforts. So
okay.
Thank you.
And hello, my name is Yvette Stevens. I am Vice President of Economic Inclusion for Gilbane Building Company.
Gilbane Building Company. Okay, I'm assuming a construction company. What's Ernst & Young off the top? Thank you, Beachy Cogito. Ernst & Young, a big accounting group. Okay, so we've got accounting, we got construction. All right.
And for those of you revenue. And my role there is to make sure we're maximizing participation of our small and diverse businesses. So that means whether a contract or a client requests that we have participation or not, we want to make sure that that's a priority for us within our industry.
Define a diverse business. Please, I want to know.
Well, thank you, both of you. And Yvette, let's start with you. We'll keep it simple, and then we'll start digging a little bit deeper into some of these activities. But just real quick, how is Gilbane expanding investment in minority entrepreneurship?
Minority entrepreneurship. Okay, so diverse businesses equate to race-based businesses. You're assessing a business on the basis of, I guess, the race of the ownership. Okay.
I'd say we're really focused in two ways. So one, we made a commitment of $4 billion to generate that much over the next 5 years for our small and diverse firms, actually for diverse firms.
Okay, so you're dedicating $4 billion to firms, first and foremost on the basis of the race of the ownership. Okay.
And I say that specifically because we took out the word small when it came to that commitment, because our focus really is to be to ensure that we provide those opportunities to organizations where we've seen that there's been a true disparity across the country. And so what that means is that we had to internally first focus on how we do business.
Okay.
So we didn't want this to just be a number. We wanted to ensure that this was a way in which we do business, and we ensure that contractors are getting those opportunities on all of our projects.
Getting those opportunities, and what qualifies them for that opportunity? It's not just a number. Okay, well, there must be some kind of statistics you were looking at in the first place to justify this, right? Okay, but you don't have a target number. You're just going to, across the board, filter who you're working with on what they look like. I'm sorry to put it in such simple terms. I'm sure there's much more nuance to that if I was speaking to our speaker directly, but that's what it sounds like you're saying.
So from the way we procure our projects, to how we do outreach, to how we even outline our bid packages, we wanted to ensure that that commitment was known and that we use our processes and procedures to ensure that that happens.
Thank you. Jackie?
What processes and procedures are you using to make sure that happens? What is your procedure when assessing a potential contractor for business or to be the recipient of this program? Like what's your first go-to checkbox, as it were? I'm seeing in the chat people are saying I'm roboting here and there. Guys, apparently StreamYard is just being goofy today, or my internet is being chunky in places. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. So if I robot for a second or two, apologies, not much I can do about that. Live TV. If I completely drop out, however, which has happened a couple of times in the past, please just put a bunch of red X's in the chat. Like in my peripheral vision, I'll see something's wrong. But if it's just a second or two of roboting, I don't know. I can't affect that, unfortunately. I wish I could have a hardline connection to my internet, but the way that the internet connections are arranged in my apartment, I have to use Wi-Fi. I don't have the ability to have a hardline connection, unfortunately, unless I move my entire quote unquote studio to the living room, which would sound even worse than this does. So.
Same question to you. How is EY expanding opportunities for minority entrepreneurs?
Right. So one of the things about probably 5 years ago that we recognized is we did some research and just reinforced the issue that there's a huge disparity for Black and Latinx business owners in business.
A huge disparity. Okay. What's that disparity caused by? Do you know? Okay.
So 3 years ago, we launched our Entrepreneur Access Network program, and we recognized that there were major things that were missing. One was capital or cash, right? The other thing was capacity building. And then the other piece were connections or access. So our Entrepreneur Access Network is a national program where we work with Black and Latino business owners to grow and scale their business.
Okay. So this program is not accessible to Asian business owners or white business owners or say Native American business owners or Pacific Islander business owners, just Black and Latino. Okay, just want to make sure I understand the parameters of your program.
There's curriculum, and then there's also the value of connectivity to partners and leaders within the firm to function as one-to-one advisors, coaching them, mentoring them, but more importantly, making connections to industry executives, to join the supply chain, to others, to learn about how to do business with government, to expand their portfolio, or just how to manage a strategic alliance and make sure there's a synergy to grow your business.
Right, as long as you pass the aesthetic test, right, okay.
The previous discussion focused a lot about intentional networking. And when you talk about the Entrepreneurship Access Network, it's easier just to EAN. So EAN.
Okay, we'll use EAN from there.
No, we love acronyms around here. Intentional. Yeah, that word's always come up. I remember the first time I ever heard that word used with such regularity, it was one of my early videos looking at what was called the Lesbians Who Tech Conference. You have to go way back in my archive to find this, but there was a speaker who was giving effectively sort of like a TED or TEDx talk on the necessity or the advantages of having this Lesbians Who Tech conference as opposed to just a tech conference. And one of the things she brought up over and over again was intentionality in choosing speakers. And she said it with such reverence, like intentionality, like it really meant something really deep. All it meant was that she was making sure she picked people on the basis of what they looked like. She was being intentional in putting that as a first filter before selecting speakers. I kid you not. You have to listen to her explain this and try to get. I mean, she thinks she's being very, I don't know, profound. But if you whittle down to what she's saying, it's just like, oh, if left to my own devices, I saw myself contacting more white speakers than other speakers. Very intentional, which just meant racially discriminatory.
You talked a little bit about how EY, which sponsors the Entrepreneur of the Year, how that network of some of the most remarkable men and women entrepreneurs in the United States, how that dovetails into what you're building through EAN, which is very intentional networking. Can you expand a little bit about the connectivity between one of the world's leading entrepreneurship recognition networks and what you're building with EAN?
Is it just me, or does this guy sound like he's just, and maybe that's his job. He just sounds like a professional apple polisher, if you get my meaning. Yeah, just like buttering everybody up, like, wow, it's just the most amazing thing ever and everything. Like a hype man, a pitch man or something, I suppose. I mean, I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Yeah, and I love that you've found that connectivity. It is aspirational.
What?
So
What?
many people do know us from our EOY global program and the value that we've been able to have with many household names before they were household names. And so many of our entrepreneurs to us represent the pipeline. So working with them when they are 2+ years in the maturity stages, figuring out how to take a 97% of Black businesses that are sole proprietorships to actually having employees, to leading, to growing and scaling your business, getting them to that point where there's consistent revenue, there's a growth strategy, and then making them a viable candidate for our EOY program.
But the requirement to be a recipient of all this help, assistance, and growth is that they pass the racial test. You guys keep sort of, I mean, I guess that's just part and parcel. There's really nothing more to say about it in that sense. It just continually surprises me that they're just so comfortable with this. It's just so casual. It's like, oh yeah, we do all this work and we help these people to grow their businesses, to make the connections, and give them all these resources and all this, that, and the other. As long as you match the color palette, which is underpinning all of this.
I think the other piece of it is more brass tacks locally. I'm actually on the New Jersey Black Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And one of the things that we did in New Jersey was we made sure that there were deliberate connections being made between the entrepreneurs who were part of the cohort and folks like John Harmon at the Black Chamber of Commerce or Tom Bracken at the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce. So they understood the value. There was more than just getting the rubber chicken and attending an event, but how do you make connections and maximize those relationships? And that's really what the value has been.
How do you make connections and maximize? Well, if you're using the weight and prestige of your company to leverage and or pressure other organizations to make contacts with certain business owners because you've chosen them for their particular attributes that have first and foremost nothing to do with either their business plan, their business experience, anything else but their aesthetic. What possible outcome could there be to them saying no, other than obviously you're racist? Because you see, if you base the entire thing on race to begin with, and someone says, I'm not interested in working with this business, not that person, but this business. If you look at the business plan, if you look at its outcomes or its prospects, and you say, this is not a viable investment, but since you front loaded everything with, this is for underrepresented, this is for diverse businesses, they have that arrow in your quiver that will never go away for bad PR. It sounds all nice and friendly and all, but I just there's something sinister at the base of all this.
And Yvette, I saw you nodding during particular parts of Jackie's response. In particular, I sensed some enthusiasm about how you're taking folks within your program, with Gilbane, for instance.
Are you a mind reader? I sensed. He's got a sixth sense for these things, guys. When she's nodding in agreement to things, just sort of ambiguously, he knows what she's thinking. You
have the commitment, but then you also have what the Rising Contractor program that seems to mirror what Jackie was talking about as far as building capacity within existing companies. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Building capacity within existing companies. You mean opening up more jobs? Building capacity. What? I honestly want to know, what does that mean?
Exactly. I think it was two things you said. One about the building capacity.
Yeah, no, it is really. Tell me what do you mean by building capacity? Because when I think of when it comes to a business building capacity, either you're getting a new warehouse for your stock, or you're opening up more job opportunities, I guess.
And then the other part about the relationships, because I feel like and not even just feel like, I know that if it's not about the relationships, then it never happens, and you think about it this way. So where you get your hair done, whether you go to a barbershop or you go into a beauty salon, right? You don't just trust anybody.
Well, given the lack of complexity to my hair care, I'm not really that picky, but if I find a place that I like, sure, I'll keep going back there, probably more for convenience of location than anything else.
You want to go to the people that you know. And in construction, a lot of times it's the same way.
Oh, nepotism, you mean?
We keep going to the same contractors that we know over and over again.
Because they do good work? Or because of nepotism and they don't do good work? I mean, where's your quality control, I guess is the question. Okay, what's your theory?
So we have to be intentional about the fact that we want to go to other contractors and give other contractors an opportunity.
As long as they pass the palate test.
And so it's that same mindset and that same thinking of why we created the Gilbane Rising Contractor Program. One, so that we can first build those relationships. And second, to make sure that we are helping companies to grow and develop. And so through our program, it is an 8-week training portion where we teach things like how to get pre-qualified with us, how to do a proposal, how to do your own business development. But then really, sometimes I see after the 8 weeks is the real important part, right? Because you get a mentor. And that mentor is there to help to guide you, to get you on opportunities. If you have an issue maybe with how to do a change order on one of our contracts, right? Someone to sit down with you and to go through that with you. I think one of the best rewarding things I actually seen is 2 contractors in the program actually meeting up together and getting on the contract together. So it's not even just what happens in the relationships that they build with us, but it's the relationships that they build together that I see actually is of benefit to it.
So wait, you're taking on contracting companies that don't already know how to write a proposal? I mean, if you're just giving out education for the sake of education to improve businesses, great. Except you're not. You're giving out education to improve businesses with a filter in front. But you also said, I think it was her who said that she took out the small from the business part of it because we don't just work with small businesses. Do you have contractors showing up from large businesses who don't already know how to write up a proposal or who don't already know how to network or something? Again, if you didn't go to business school, if you didn't learn this stuff to start your own business in the first place, or if this is some kind of prep towards building your own business, I guess so. I'm not quite sure I understand all of this, but okay. Still, regardless, what's the first prerequisite?
And one thing that we tell people too, so if one of our contractors in the program ends up wanting to work with one of our competitors on a project, we're like, that's great. And we go and we'll introduce them to that and actually be able to be that reference for them. So for us, it's larger than just, hey, Gilbane's trying to get these contractors because they're trying to reach this number. No, we're really trying to make sure that we're bringing more contractors into the fold so that they have that sustainable growth and development.
Notice how she keeps dropping off the key component of this entire endeavor. She just says contractors. It's not just contractors. There's a qualifier there that's just not being mentioned. I mean, I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if it's just like instinctive, but it's very telling that you're not being as clear and transparent as you describe the program about what the program is actually doing and the mechanics behind it. Very interesting. And so you're willing to connect your students, because what you're basically running there is effectively a business school, right? An 8-week business course. But you're willing to connect your students with whomever they want to work with. So you're just a glorified employment agency, business class, night course, what?
So that they can provide for their families so that we have great success in the community. And as Suzanne said earlier, it's the smart thing to do.
And the programs are so complementary.
Yes.
Because I look at Gilbane 4 years, right? Generational, started out as a family-owned business. We were talking about it earlier. That's what we want for our entrepreneurs.
That's right.
Many of the
there is a word or two that needs to come before entrepreneur or contractor. You're not talking about the widest swath demographic of business practice. You're talking about discrimination. racial discrimination in who you're serving.
The businesses that we're mentoring are first generation entrepreneurs. So they didn't get the benefit of having a grandparent or a parent say, let me impart these nuggets to you.
Oh, okay. So first generation. So they've never run a business before. Okay. Well, now that would be a fine heading out thing, because that is an aspect of circumstance, right? But you can also have people who aren't Black or Latino who are first generation entrepreneurs, because your skin color does not determine that your grandparent gave you a business. Or am I missing something here?
Let me make sure that you avoid the pitfalls that we did. So they are literally starting from square one. So when you have programs like this that not only provide the training and the support, but then also serve as an exemplar to what it looks like to have generational wealth, I mean, to me, that's hitting the jackpot, right?
That's right.
An exemplar. So you're propping up a business that is setting up educational and financial resources that are set exclusively for people on the basis of race, and you're touting them as an exemplar of behavior, both, I guess, in life and in business. I think there's a 1964 Civil Rights Act that might want to have a conversation with you, a courageous conversation.
Well, not only that, but I would suspect that there are a number of folks here in the room and watching online who are thinking, this sounds fantastic. I've got to get in these programs. I've got to get in EAN. I've got to get in Gilbane's program. And
except that you, speaker, as far as I know, wouldn't be allowed in those programs. I've got to get in those programs. Okay, how do I get in those programs?
And I can assure you that the team here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is going to follow up with anyone who registered for this session with the contact information, so that you can take advantage of some of this tremendous information that's being shared.
As long as you are of the races that they serve. If you're not that, regardless of your merit, regardless of your business plan, regardless of your product, doesn't matter. If you don't pass the palate test, you don't get to take advantage of any of this.
So Jackie, Yvette shared just like that wonderful moment where she saw two contractors coming together and bidding on a project together. There must be similar moments that you've seen with some of the EAN cohorts as they've come through. Could you share a couple with it?
I'm happy to. And those are the types of things that keep our advisors wanting to do this. They volunteer, right? The leaders in our firm volunteer to take on a business to mentor. We've had examples of one of our EAN entrepreneurs actually during COVID became a vendor to EY and sub to us for rental assistance work that we were doing. As you guys know, there was the administration of the rental assistance, but a big component of that was the communication to the community, where here we had a local business. I think, the prior panel talked about it. There is value in getting local small businesses. We had a local business who understood the nuances of communication. They understood the methods of communication, how to get the word out best. So we partnered with them, and that was super successful. In fact, it helped us ensure that one of those cities gave out like 100% of their ERAP funds. That was great. And it was mission-oriented work that this business is super proud of. And she's now taken that qual to do more work with government. So those are the types of things that we want to see happen.
Yeah. And how did this person get that opportunity? What was the first check mark? And really the only check mark needed. I also have a question. I'm curious. In their mentorship program, are they as well as selective with who gets to be a mentor as they are with who gets to be a beneficiary of the program? Just curious.
And now she's got teams. We talk about capacity building, but there is a difference from getting a supplier contract and getting on the supply chain and getting the revenue, and being wise enough to translate a contract into capacity building that you can then leverage for additional revenue. That's the rub.
And that
that would take probably some kind of business skill and or training, which I'm guessing you provide to certain people.
capacity building, Yvette, is critical in the rising contractor program.
It is.
And I think the question I had for you is that here in Washington, D.C., when we talk about the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the billions of dollars that are going, I'm curious about how many folks come into your system saying,
Folks.
well, there's all this money out there. How do I work with you to get these contracts? And you probably advise them like, hey, slow your roll a little bit here. Like,
Yeah, slow down a little bit. Let me check your pigmentation.
let's get you into the system. Let's talk about capacity building. How long does that process take when you're starting with a legitimate and capable company?
Oh, a legitimate and capable company. Oh, is that a concern? I hadn't heard that being a concern to this point. Okay.
How long does that process take where you feel as though they have built the capacity to handle some pretty tremendous contracts?
I'm actually going to say that's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because there's no... I mean, good answer to that question. It was a kind of a dumb question, a bit too broad. But yeah, that's the best answer. You really have to assess each business on its own merits, the situation, what they're trying to do, etc.
And but that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Because every contractor that comes to, at least to our Gilbane Rising Contractor Program, well, just that works with Gilbane is not on the same level, right? So that's when I talked about it's important to have that mentor.
Whoa, not on the same level. The playing field's been leveled. You only have one requirement before they come to you, right? Maybe I missed something here. Let me back up a little bit.
Is not on the same level, right? So that's when I talked about it's important to have that mentorship piece, because we want to make sure that we're not pushing folks, further along than maybe they are, or also making sure that we're, stifling their growth as well. So that's why I like it that, and Jackie, one of the things you talked about is that the folks within your organization volunteer to do the work, right? Because it's like you start to see where this becomes more of a cultural change for your organization and not just something that we do or you're hiring somebody to do or paying someone to do just so for the look of it,
Okay, wait a second. Let's back up. I want to hear that part one more time.
Volunteer to do the work, right? Because it's like you start to see where this becomes more of a cultural change for your organization and not just something that we do or you're hiring somebody to do or paying someone to do just so for the look of it. It's not one thing we like to emphasize. It's that it's impact over optics.
Not for the look of it. Impact over optics. By the way, this entire program is set up for Black and Latino business owners. Guys, we're basically just providing a charity here. It's not about the profit. Now, we're providing a charity for specific types of people, but it's not about the optics. It's not about the look. It's about a cultural shift. Okay.
Right. So it's not just about, hey, we want people to look at Gilbane and think that we're doing something. We put out this $4 billion number, right?
That's exactly what you're doing. This is nothing but a virtue signal. As soon as you put race up as the determiner of who gets the benefit of this, it is about the look. It is about the virtue signal. It is about saying, hey, we've got good PR. We're doing the righteous thing by eliminating the possibilities and opportunities for entire swaths of the population unless you match our palate requirement. That's exactly what you're doing. You got to be kidding me.
Are we actually making that impact? So we really like to ensure that we are looking at it at a case-by-case basis and doing the right thing by each company based on where they are.
No. You're doing it. Look, that might be the secondary consideration. I'll grant you, maybe at some point you do consider the actual viability and profitability of the business, but that is not what this is about. That is not your first primary concern here. You've told us, and you've also kind of slid away from even mentioning it after this whole talk started. You just talk about contractors or entrepreneurs without qualification. You talk about businesses without talking about which businesses get the benefit. No, you're not talking about a meritorious system here. You've already told us this. You keep trying to make it sound like you are, but it's not.
And I think it's very important to meet people where they are.
Oh,
One of the things in the Rising Contractor program that I've heard from some companies, they're like, look, Yvette, we're past that. I don't need you to teach me how to do a change order or how to bid on a project. I've done that, right? So what can you do to provide me some support to grow my business? You know, it could be a $10 million company already that wants to get to $20 million.
wait. A $10 million company comes to you and you're going to, give them free help? Why does a $10 million company need, you're a building contractor business. I mean, you're not a financial, or am I? Okay, I'm off in la la land with how this is supposed to work. So big business comes to you and says, you got to do this thing for me. You got to teach me how to do this stuff. Okay.
And so that's when we look at it and say, okay, how can we provide some mentorship for that growth and development?
What do you owe them? I mean, maybe I'm missing something. I mean, she's making it sound like this is effectively a charitable program. Like they've dedicated $4 billion and the people are volunteering and so on and so forth. So some established company comes to you, a building construction management company, to teach them how to do contracting better. What do you get out of it from these large corporations? Again, if you were just helping out small businesses, setting aside your first requirement, obviously, if you're helping out small businesses that don't have either the capital or the footing to get on par with some of the big boys in trying to compete, okay, that would make more sense to me. Why would you be servicing $10 million, $20 million companies with stuff that sounds like, for lack of a better phrase, contractor 101 kind of teaching? Am I missing something? I must be missing something.
And I'll be honest with you. So we have 3,000 employees, and I'll tell you, most of us have never run a business.
You have 3,000 employees. Most of you have never run a business, but you're operating this entire program in order to educate businesses, small or otherwise, on how to business better. Okay.
Right? So it's different. It's a different level of advice that you need to give to those types of businesses.
Well, wait. Huh? Okay, now I'm just royally confused. The bulk of your employees have no experience running a business, but you've dedicated $4 billion to giving an 8-week preparatory course to contractors / entrepreneur, whatever, on how to improve their business, improve their capacity, improve their growth. And people volunteering to mentor these contractors are coming from your business, when more likely than not, these mentors, by your own admission now, don't have any or much experience in running a business. What did I must be missing something here, or something must have been misstated, because I am even more confused now about how this is supposed to work beyond just the preliminary discrimination filter.
So what we do is we do a lot of partnering with other organizations, with other firms who have been through the program, or those who are at a different level than some of the firms go through our program, to say, hey, how about we team you up to help provide that support that may be beyond, where we can provide that support to you as an organization.
So wait, you're just a glorified networker then? You're dedicating $4 billion to just networking and farming out educational opportunities from other businesses to the people you're recruiting on the basis of their race first and foremost? Okay, this almost sounds like a government operation. I don't know what to tell you. I am ridiculously confused. A few more hellos since I've got a moment here. Shadow Claw, a guy in his room. Darren Root. I saw Bridget in there earlier. Nathaniel Rotskull. Swifty Meme Lord. Anybody else? The Undead Kaiser. Herr Kaiser. Guten Tag. And the Asia Research Directorate. Good morning. Again, if I missed you, or if you're lurking, or if you're in the future, good morning.
When you talk about access, I just want to, I've heard a lot of our businesses that we mentor ask, whether it's ARPA dollars or even grants and incentives, we hear there's money out there, especially post, the tipping point. We hear
Down in front. Get your head out of the camera.
there's funding out there. How do we even access? Where do we look? They don't do this for a living, right? They don't search for grants or loans. They don't understand those. So I think a big piece of it that I hear you saying also is teaching them where these resources reside. There is no central repository for it, right? So showing them where those resources reside and then holding their hands a little bit to help them access that and be ready for it.
And why is that knowledge restricted to people on the basis of race? Why is that assistance only available to people if their skin color is the one you prefer? Why can't you offer these resources and this help and this advice to just businesses so that the economy overall can improve? I guess I'm not so much amazed, but it is telling that they have completely dropped the main motivator of this entire set of programs after the first 2 minutes or so of their conversation beginning. It is interesting.
So all three of us in our professional roles benefit from interacting every day with small businesses. We're hearing their successes. Sometimes we hear about their failures and always absorbing lessons. And so just to close out this session, I would love one piece of advice from each of you to entrepreneurs and other small businesses that you may have learned from either a cohort or the Rising Contractor program.
Yeah, okay. One lesson, softball. I'd like to hear about the amount of success they've had so far. And yes, that would require them to give us some numbers. Like, how many of your, let's say, students or recipients of these programs have gone on to lead successful businesses? Like, what is the success failure rate of graduates from your program? I'd be curious to know if they have any numbers on those. But of course, we're not really talking about numbers. It's a cultural shift, guys. There's not target goals or anything. We're not talking about, trying to get a percentage here. We're just trying to make the world a better place. Yeah, but how successful have you been at that? I'd just be curious.
I could start us out. Okay. I think one of the things, and I try to impart that on additional cohorts as we go through it, is understanding that of all of our programs and all of the things that we provide, understanding how to compartmentalize so you get value from it. So often you have the EY program, the Goldman Sachs program, JP Morgan, et cetera. And they almost like, the Girl Scout badges where they get like they almost kind of like rack them up. I've been through all the things. I've gone through all the programs.
Yeah, it's almost like it's just a checkbox now. It really doesn't mean anything, doesn't it? Especially since the basis on which most of those programs are based are not on merit.
And so I'm super deliberate around getting value. Some are mentorship based, are strictly mentorship based. Others are financially based. So you will get a grant or some lump sum of money or access to money at the end. Others, like EY, may cross section, but are more relationship based. Be thoughtful around the value that you're going to get from that program prior to engaging, and make it part of an overall plan that you have for your business. So that that's a lot of time, right?
Well, what value is there in name brand, right? If I can say as a contractor that I partnered with Ernst & Young in their mentorship program, if I can put that on my advertising, if I can say that I have a relationship with Ernst & Young on a professional basis, that's value in and of itself, right? I mean, I don't know what value Ernst & Young is getting out of from the opposite end of things, except to say that, oh, look at all the good that we're doing with our diverse companies, right? Ernst & Young gets the PR boost, and involved contractors, companies, whatever, get to put that badge on their website or on their letterhead or on their prospectus or whatever. I mean, what does it actually mean at the end of the day? I don't know. 8
weeks, a year, several hours a week. Just ensure that you're intentional about how you manage your time and the value you get from the programs we're providing.
Hey, Christopher Moonlight Productions is in the chat. Hey, Chris, how you doing? It's a combo of races trying to get people to segregate themselves now that it's illegal to do so by law and the ranking system of communism. They're authoritarians. I mean, at fundamentally, yes. And like I said at the top of the show, it's going to be very interesting if affirmative action gets struck down by the Supreme Court, where companies like these and organizations that promote DEI are not going to have that sort of background umbrella to run under for cover in a either philosophical or moral basis when people start challenging the fact that having a DEI program is no different than affirmative action. So
Really good advice. Yvette?
I'd say know your business and be able to articulate that to others to make sure that you can sell yourself well.
Business salesmanship 101. Know what you're talking about and be able to sell. That's good advice, I guess.
I'm going to use an example.
What?
There is a entrepreneur, I believe she's in the room. Her name is Lisa Williams, and she probably doesn't know how much I admire her. But
example.
she works with Gilbane quite a bit. She owns Cap 8 Doors and provides doors and hardwares for us as an organization. And even before I got into this work, I heard about Lisa and the work that she does, right? Because she portrays herself as, I am the owner of this business. I know my work, I know my worth, and I know what I should be going after and the jobs maybe that I shouldn't be going after.
Okay, so confidence, fake it till you make it, or maybe she, doesn't have to fake it. Great, you have confidence in yourself. Unfortunately, I have to ask the question, what does she look like? I don't want to have to ask that question, but you have forced me to do so.
And I think that confidence, as well as that business acumen, has gotten her a long way. I know, especially with us as Gilbane and wanting her to be able to work on our projects. But as well as, I hear out in the community, it seems like every time I am somewhere, she's there as well.
Would her reputation alone have been enough to convince you to work with her, or was there another factor that pushed her over the line? Again, I don't want to have to ask that question of our speaker, but I am forced to ask that question of our speaker.
So it's something about having that strength and knowledge of your business, understanding what it is that you do, and being able to articulate that and showing up, right? So when you're on the job, do the job well.
You're talking about merit, good. You're talking about acumen. You're talking about professionalism, good. Why are those not the metrics by which you select your partners? Why are you not taking a look at the individual businesses and the people running them on the basis of their skill, their business model, their successes, or anything else aside from the first concern? Because that is not your first concern.
And making sure that folks understand that and seeing that success along the way.
Well, thank you, Yvette, and thank you, Jackie. Please join me in thanking this incredible panel.
Okay, well, that's part one. We're coming up on part two. We got about a little bit over a half an hour left in my usual real-time broadcast. So the next part runs another 20 minutes or something. We'll see how much we get through by the bottom of the hour, if there's any reason to continue. If I decide I want to finish the whole thing out, then I'll just finish the whole thing out. So that's the game plan. All right, so that was entrepreneurship. The next one coming up covers workforce in some capacity. So let's find out.
Well, hello, everyone here and watching at home virtually as well. My name is Rochelle Akufo. I'm the anchor for Yahoo Finance.
Ooh, Yahoo Finance. That's where I found Hive Diversity. I like Yahoo Finance, I guess, for that sake. Also, just another reminder, the sound on the original recordings was out of sync. I fixed it. So what you're seeing, again, is a more improved version than what the United States Chamber of Commerce could provide.
And I have the pleasure of having with me here for this very interesting conversation, Eloisa Domingo. She's the Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Inclusive Diversity and Equity Officer at the Allstate Corporation.
Oh, we got a DEI officer at Allstate. All right, so we had finance, we had accounting, contracting, building contracting, and now we have insurance. Oh boy.
So we're looking forward to this conversation about workforce diversity.
Yes.
So you have obviously a vast number of years of experience, more than 20 years of working in diversity. Talk a little bit about first how the conversation has changed over that time, and how have you really seen that evolve?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks so much for having us here. You know, Rochelle, I wish I could say that it's changed a lot.
No.
You're right that I've been in this field for over 20 years. And for those of us who have been doing this work in this field, I'm sure you two are like, has it really changed? And that's kind of the sad-ish part of it, you know, that we're kind of constantly having these conversations. We're constantly saying, well, you know, why aren't we supporting our minority-owned businesses? Why don't we have, you know, kind of these great programs, you know, like the ones that we just heard?
I'm just going to guess that despite the fact that affirmative action is and has been a factor in the back of the minds of many people and the virtue signaling therein, there is still the overriding federal laws against discriminating on the basis of race. When it comes to employment, when it comes to business, and so on. If you call yourself an equal opportunity employer, but you have an officer in your company who's concerned with finding minority businesses to work with specifically, that's kind of a conflict, could bring up some legal issues. That's just my thought. I think there's some out there who are still a little wary of intentionally broadcasting a racial test for their employment or business opportunities. That's just me.
Why aren't we already thinking about these things as kind of legacy programs? You know, we had earlier our keynote speaker say, I kind of want to work myself out of a job. We've been saying that for years. Yet I still have a job, you know.
So you don't want a job? Well, quit. I'll tell you what, if you stop pushing race as a test in the first place for either employment, because we're going to be talking about workforce here, not just contracting this time, but actual hiring of employees. If you stop pushing that as a necessity, you'll not have a job real quick. Real quick. If somebody actually came along and said, hey, discriminating employment on the basis of race is actually against federal law, you shouldn't have a job, honestly, if that is your focus. But somehow it still is.
Which is good, right? My kids don't not want to let me have a job. But the point is.
The point is there is a law that already excludes you from having this job by all rights. And yet somehow you have this job and it's been permissible for you to push this philosophy for years. It is, if only I didn't have this job that forced me to be racist. I wish there was something, some legislation or something that told me that my job was completely and absolutely obsolete on the basis of law. Oh, well.
How have we actually integrated these into our practices so that the rubric is very easy, right? That it's not just the people who have diversity in our titles that we're pushing this. So, you know, while the one thing that has changed is things like this, having these conversations that are not tucked in, having these conversations that are public, having these conversations that are also part of public policy.
Yeah, it is amazing. I will say it is amazing. Over the last 6 years in doing YouTube, the casualness with which diversity officers and corporate executives and things like that have been uncouching their language when they're talking about what their intentions are has been remarkable. If you go back in my channel to my diversity imperative playlist and you watch those first few videos, you'll see me and hear me on many occasions commenting on just how they're kind of using vague language and kind of like walking around the actual intention of what they're talking about, being very, very ambiguous, very diplomatic about their metrics in their diversity and inclusion programs. Until you get to that one video, and I think it was called, what did I call it? Unfiltered diversity or something like that. I forget. Anyway, it was a guy from Accenture, the company Accenture, and he was talking on a stage, I believe in a country that was not America. So I think he felt like he didn't have any room to maneuver in using colloquialisms or any slang in his in his presentation, and he just laid it out there in the first minute or two. He just laid it out there, and there was no mystery as to what he meant. And and if you watch the video, you'll hear me remark on just how amazing it was to hear somebody say it so plainly, because up to that point, I'd never heard someone be so upfront about what they meant and intended to do with their program. But he was just the first of many as time went on, as seemingly there are no consequences or downfalls to promoting this kind of philosophy in business, that it became much more comfortable to say exactly what you mean when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and racial and or gender and or orientation discrimination.
That's one of the things that I think that has changed. The other things that have also changed is you've got marquee names like Allstate, like Ernst. You've got these marquee names here.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, marquee names wouldn't risk having these conversations on a main stage. We would say like, I mean, we're kind of thinking, about it.
Yeah, because they understood the legal risk. And I honestly, like I said before, I honestly think it's going to come crashing down again if affirmative action gets kiboshed. I really do. I think that will send a signal that no, you don't have this gray area to hide under anymore. The law is the law. You cannot discriminate. Period.
We're now taking a risk and saying we're not doing it great, but we're doing something. So that I will say that has changed. We still have a long way to go, but those are some things I'm pretty proud of having changed.
Now, one of my favorite books is called Start With Why. And for a lot of companies, they sort of go out to sort of have these solutions, perhaps without consulting their communities or without really understanding the core values of what's driving it. So as you look at things like inclusive diversity and equity as a core value of Allstate, how do you define that? And how do you see that show up in things like company culture?
Yeah.
Yes. Definitions. Define it for us.
Yeah. Great question. So, some of the things that you've heard from the colleagues before me on this stage have been really, really amazing, kind of things. Allow me to also kind of brag a little bit about where Allstate is. Two major things. And this is to answer your question about how do we actually see it involved in the culture.
Yes.
So, it's one thing for a company to talk about hiring diversity, promoting diversity. That's always kind of been the core of diversity efforts for most companies. But when you talk about where you're putting your money, like where you're spending your money in a very consistent way, that's when a company really makes a difference.
Okay, well, then tell us, where are you putting your money and how does that achieve the goals of your program?
So at Allstate in 2020, we had a $1.2 billion bond deal, which was the largest of its kind, exclusively managed or comprised by minority-owned businesses, veteran, women-owned, minority-owned businesses. Again,
Veteran, women, minority-owned. Okay, now the veteran thing is always interesting because I come across the veteran aspect to it when I see things about employee resource groups. Oftentimes when I look at a business or a panel discussion talking about employee resource groups, they'll mention veterans in there. And that always stuck out to me because of everything else that they usually mention, like the women's employee resource group or the Asian employee resource group or the African-American employee resource group or the LGBT employees. The veteran one, I always my brain went, well, being a veteran is a element of merit. It's a reflection of something that you've done. It's a reflection of a sacrifice that you made, a choice that you made that has no filter on it for the kind of person you are. So the veteran part, I always thought made a lot more sense, right? Giving opportunities to veterans, giving opportunities to people who fall under a particular socioeconomic line, right? That you either are a person who has done something or is bound by a circumstance outside of their control. Those kind of things make more sense to me as factors to consider when giving people opportunities or setting up special programs or things, that kind of deal. So you mentioned veterans. It's almost, I know this is the cynical part of me, but when a company talks about their ERGs or their opportunity programs and they throw in veterans as well, even though I think that's a demographic that certainly deserves consideration beyond, Joe Normal civilian, I always feel like it's also there as sort of a shield, as a dilution tactic, to blunt criticism of such programs. Again, might just be my cynicism talking, but when it's always sort of like offhandedly mentioned or added as a third or fourth option in the whole thing, it feels like it's a tool to blunt criticism.
Largest of its kind at that time, that was exclusively managed by minority groups. As a result of that, we've actually seen more companies do that in the amount of about 300% growth in support of those companies.
Based on, at least in large part, their race and or their gender. Okay.
Or those enterprises. One of the things that Allstate promised themselves, and this is one of the reasons I came to Allstate, is we promised ourselves that we would do better. We promised ourselves, we didn't promise anyone else, we promised ourselves that we would do better.
Better than what? And how do you measure better?
And that we would be bold. And so we did this in 2020, right? We didn't really know how it was going to go, but we did it.
Okay, what were your target numbers? You spent $1.2 billion on this, and
so that's the one thing about our culture, I think that's also really good. One of the other things too, to kind of piggyback on some of the colleagues that were just before me, in the pandemic, a lot of people sold their properties because we all went hybrid. We all have offices at home. We don't really need to come into our office space. We're excited now to see one another.
Or we couldn't afford the rent on said properties or the lease or whatever else because all the businesses were being shut down, the economy was being destroyed. Some people it was out of necessity, some people it was out of just practicality, a combination of the two, sure.
But in general, there's some percentage of our work that is hybrid, right? So you've got all these real estate offices, or you've got your real estate, you're paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for, but you're really not using them. So Allstate, I'm sure, you can drive around here and we've got Allstate like agency buildings, right? Or like you see, like in the communities, you've got this little office space, like right beside a vet or something like that. They're not being used, anymore. So what we're doing is we're offering them to our minority owned businesses.
So you're giving out property to people on the basis of race. I seem to recall kind of a historical complaint of a kind, a legitimate historical complaint of a kind that I constantly have seen thrown in people's faces. Okay, all right.
We're saying these can be your business centers, free of charge. You don't have to rent them. You don't have to use them. You can go in and use our space. We're not using them.
Okay, yeah, right. As long as they pass the palate test. This is great. This is great. This is the kind of confessions. See, the one thing that I also think about, and I'm thinking about more and more in the last week or so, is that there is so much video evidence of corporate officers declaring their racist practices to an audience in public, no filter, no coercion, nothing, and that they're proud of these programs. I am just waiting to see what the Supreme Court does with affirmative action. And then part of my brain for the last 6 years, I've wondered, with so much confessional footage of corporations telling the world what they're doing and how they're doing it, why there aren't a landslide of lawsuits against such companies for their demonstrably and declaratory racist or discriminatory practices. It boggles the mind. Like right now, I have to think there is some law out there about providing business opportunities or land opportunities to people on the basis of race, like a rental opportunity, something like that, where your first and foremost consideration is the color of the person's skin. I just have this feeling. Call me psychic. I don't know. I think there's some kind of rule out there that might be problematic for that declaration on our speaker's part right now. But she is proud to say it. And it's right here in perpetuity. It's amazing.
Right? Why don't we go in? And then we're also offering mentorships and things like that. If we can at least offer our real estate free of charge, that's something that we can do very easily. We're also talking about, I think many of you already know that Allstate, we kind of exclusively own the Sugar Bowl kind of branding. And so what we've been talking about is looking at Black-owned businesses and highlighting anywhere between 5 to 10 of them on the 50-yard line. We don't need, Allstate doesn't need to be, the only one on there. Why don't we highlight and offer real estate space even at the Sugar Bowl and things like that? So,
okay, so you're going to reserve advertising for people on the basis of their skin color. I'm no legal expert. It sounds a bit fishy to me. That's all I got to say. If that is your metric, if that's your first test for giving up advertising space to someone or giving that opportunity to someone through your business, I got to say, sounds a little suspect. And I wonder what our speaker would say. I really do. If we took her exact same text here and just replaced every instance of minority owned or black owned and flipped out those words with white owned. I wonder what she would say. I wonder what kind of problem she would have with that. What her argument would be against such a statement or against such a policy. Really makes me curious.
So there are some unique things that we're trying to do to really, like you said, Rochelle, change the culture.
And I love how intentional Allstate is being about this, having those sort of internal benchmarks, because a lot of us will see the external ones, the ones that the companies put on their websites, but we don't often get to hear about some of these behind the scene conversations, which are very important.
Yes, tell us about the benchmarks. Tell us about the quotas you've got. Tell us about the percentages you're trying to hit and how you're doing that, please.
Another way that Allstate was in being proactive was in going before the House Committee on Financial Services.
Yeah.
Something they proactively did, not subpoenaed. We know a lot of companies come, dragged kicking and screaming. Talk about your decision to do that and what you were hoping to achieve with that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So for those of you who don't know, the House Financial Services, they have a subcommittee on diversity and inclusion.
Of course they do.
They audited about 27 of the largest insurance companies in America under this review called the Review of Diversity and Inclusion at America's Largest Insurance Companies. So we were one of them, right? We ranked pretty well in the top 4th, which was great. We still have a lot of work to do.
Okay, so by what metrics were they auditing these companies? I can only imagine, and I think I can probably imagine fairly accurately. And how does Allstate intend to solve for that problem?
And about the 13 or 14 companies then received a letter asking them to join a hearing a couple weeks ago at Congress to talk about, how they did. All the companies said, no, thank you. And Allstate said, we'll do it. And we did not receive a letter, actually. We said, well, I heard that people were being invited. Why don't we go? And it's funny because I know you all are like, why would you do that? Like, what?
Yeah, why would you do that? What is the purpose of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee or whatever? I mean, I can only assume, again, I have, unless she tells us, I can only assume they were evaluating these businesses on the basis of their workforce demographics. How many white people they had, how many black people they had, how many Asian people they had, the percentages, etc. And if the percentages did not match some, arbitrary scale of quality, then they wanted to interrogate these businesses on what they were doing to solve this problem. And I honestly, if I can find, if they actually had held a committee meeting where they had all those businesses show up and they had to answer for that question, I would love to know what their answers would be on how they're going to solve for that problem without being racially discriminatory, because if that's the only metric you're looking at, how else do you solve for that problem but to hire people and or promote people on the basis of their race? Okay, Allstate, you who weren't invited, what did you say? Because
Congress is really hard. It was really hard.
Congress is really hard. Like, oh my God.
To be there. And, but we, meaning HR, corporate brand, our government relations team, we had a conversation and we said, you know what?
Was it a courageous conversation, Glenn Singleton?
We're not doing the best, but we're not doing bad either.
Well, what are you doing? What were your ratings? What are your percentages? How far do you have to go? What exactly is your target goal for diversity? And we scored pretty well on the audit. And I think that we're at a place where... Well, how did you score on the audit? What did the audit look at? Okay, now I'm going to have to go find this footage from like C-SPAN or something, because now I'm just... ridiculously curious to know what went on at this meeting.
Where we should be talking about this. We should be saying, you know what? Why don't we just push the conversation? We promised ourselves that we'd be bold. So why don't we go to Congress and say that we would, right? So we did. We were the only private company that showed up. There were 5 witnesses. The other 4 were trade associations. I got asked a question by everybody several times.
Yes.
It was really, really tough.
Yeah.
But we were really proud because we lived into our own promise to say that, again, we're going to talk about it. We're going to expose, what we're not doing well and where we are doing well.
If she doesn't detail what she's talking about here, I think I know what I'm doing for the next Sunday stream. I'm going to try to find that footage of her testifying in front of Congress, because I am ridiculously curious now to know what they asked her, what their answers were. We're going to stand in our own brand and say, listen, like, we're really committed, and so that's why I think we did it. And don't get me wrong, this was a calibrated risk that we took. We do feel that it paid off in the end. We're really proud of ourselves for the way that we showed up. But we're really proud of ourselves. We weren't invited. We came to a party we weren't invited to show off, I guess, or to face the music. Gave more testimony in public for future use against us, perhaps.
But it also pushes us to think, well, if we want to continue to do that, how should we actually make, more change?
Yeah.
And we also wanted to show the U.S. government, the Congress, the chamber, that Allstate is in this. We are in this. We are committed.
Right.
We want to expose, a level of humility. I think that's really important here as we're talking about this. Systemic bias, all of these biases, redlining is very real.
Systemic bias and redlining. When you just told us that you're giving opportunities to people on the basis of their race, you're providing free real estate to people on the basis of their race, and free advertising space to people on the basis of their race. Yeah, gosh, systemic discrimination, systemic racism. Oh my God. Redlining. Are you kidding me right now? Are you listening to yourself? I mean, I laughed out of ironic shock there for a second, but let's be honest here. This is insane. This is insane. She is proud on the one hand to be practicing racially discriminatory practices in business, but also trying to battle against systemic discrimination and redlining. And what are those based around in reference to this? Might I ask our speaker, what is at the core of each of those things you just brought up? It's incredible. It really is incredible.
And we live in all of the contemporary impact of that. So the biggest thing that we should do as companies, especially marquee names like Allstate, we should say, yeah, you know what, we were a part of it. Maybe not directly, but we were a part of it.
So let's just find a different way to do it so we can make ourselves feel better about it. And the principle is exactly the same, but we're going to brand it as a good thing. Keep spinning.
How can we also be a part of the solution?
Right, the solution.
Something that's important, obviously, for all companies is data, because sometimes when we have these conversations about diversity and inclusion, it becomes a nice to have, but as we've been hearing consistently, it's also a smart to have. And one of the things that came up in that hearing was about diversity data being a critical tool for companies. So,
yes, tell us about your metrics, about your percentages, about how you're at this point with your numbers and demographics, but you want to be at this point. And then tell us, again, how do you solve for that problem?
How is Allstate using that data to really improve workplace diversity?
Yeah.
And how key is that to accountability and sort of moving forward?
Yes.
Yeah. If you all don't have scorecards already, I would really encourage you to have scorecards. Prior to my coming on to Allstate, we were kind of haphazardly looking at our data, haphazardly looking at the way that we were hiring, promoting, retaining people of color, women of color, LGBTQ veteran,
Okay. How are you hiring for people of color? how are you hiring for women? Hold on. I got to back up a little bit. I want to hear that one more time.
Workplace diversity.
Yeah.
And how key is that to accountability and
Yeah.
sort of moving forward from there?
Yeah. If you all don't have scorecards already, I would really encourage you to have scorecards. Prior to my coming on Allstate, we were kind of haphazardly looking at our data, haphazardly looking at the way that we were hiring, promoting, retaining people of color, women of color, LGBTQ veteran,
Notice how she throws veteran there at the very end. Again, I know it might just be my cynicism, but throwing in veterans as a cover, as a blunt, as insulation for argument or criticism, it feels really cheap to me. Now, obviously, I'm not a mind reader, but our speaker is not the first diversity officer, company or otherwise, to use veterans mixed in amongst a whole bunch of other demographics that have nothing to do with personal merit. It is something that I think needs more attention. It just feels very cheap. It feels very exploitive in a way. But yeah, okay. So how are you hiring for all of those demographics and attributes which are completely non-determinative of one's merit in the company?
All of these things. It was pretty haphazard at best.
Okay, so now you have an organized system of hiring on the basis of race, gender, orientation. Is that it?
We did not have one corporate scorecard. We just didn't.
Yeah, because, quotas would imply discrimination on a legal basis, on a paperwork basis. Okay, so now you have those?
We're also not transparent about our data. And so we changed that. We did two things. So one, we created what we call an IDE dashboard, Inclusive Diversity and Equity dashboard at Allstate. All of our HRBPs have access to this. Our directors and above all have access to.
Okay, so the blame is spread all around for the eventual lawsuits. Great. Okay, so no one can say they don't know about these practices. I love this.
This data. You can go in right now and say, as of this date, how is my hiring for women of color? How is my hiring for Hispanics? How is my hiring for this? And then you can use that data and have conversations, real-time conversations, right, about this. So that's number one.
Okay, I gotta say, this is almost, at least from my gut reaction, this is almost on par with that Accenture presentation from way back when. Because there is no ambiguity here. There is no room to maneuver on what she's declaring about what her company is doing. Absolutely none. I am both gratified by the honesty and also shocked by the honesty. Okay, well, so you measure how many people you are hiring on the basis of their race and or their gender and or their orientation. Okay. Not about their workability, not about their professionalism, not about their work experience, not about their skill set, not about their education. Your dashboard is a racial metric, a discriminatory tool. Okay, well, your dashboard says you're not hiring enough African-American women. How are you going to solve for that problem? I think it's a fairly easy solve, isn't it? When you sort of reduce everybody down to the lowest common denominator and set aside merit in your employment practices. By all means, tell us more about how you are inherently violating federal law.
Our talent scorecards are offered monthly.
Talent? Oh, what constitutes talent?
Between the 5th and 10th of every month, our monthly scorecards around talent go out to all of our EVPs, their business partners, and they're held accountable on a quarterly basis to say, okay, well, how did you actually do? Well,
how did you actually do in hiring the best people for the job? Or
they get monthly scorecards. We talk about it as a company quarterly. So here's what happens about that. You know how most companies, all companies at least, you look at your checkbook monthly, right? So you're saying, where are we spending our money? What tab do we do? All this other stuff. We're elevating a diversity data in that same way. So then the same way that you're looking at your money, you need to be looking at your people every single month. That's the elevation of the conversation.
Yeah, looking at your people. It's all about the look.
It's the elevation of consciousness. So it's not just the data and the governance of the data, but it's the use of the data, the messaging, of it. All of our employee resource groups, they also get access to the data to use that for their solutions. We don't want diversity data to be scary. Again,
it might be scary for your lawyers right about now. I honestly, I'm amazed. I'm amazed at this. She has just declared in no uncertain terms that her company has literally a dashboard in process, an accessible database being used by the entire leadership of the company to measure the racial quotient of their workforce as a metric for improvement. I am not a civil rights attorney. I am not a legal expert, but that sure sounds to me like really easy grounds for a civil rights lawsuit against Allstate. I could be wrong. Like I say, I'm a total layman here, but just looking at the black letter law of the Civil Rights Act under the employment laws specifically, I don't know. I don't know how you get around that. I don't know if this declaration by our speaker, you don't have a surefire case against Allstate for a massive civil rights lawsuit.
Again, we govern it, of course, to maintain privacy and data excellence. But at the same time, we also don't want it to be so far away where, like you said, Rachel, people aren't actually using it.
Because that might be overwhelming for a company. If they do initially put out one of these scorecards and they see that perhaps they're falling a lot further short than they expected, how do they go from that point to then building best practices?
Yeah. A lot of it is, as I mentioned, just making sure that we're having these transparent conversations, but then also looking at the systems that might support, like you said, those deficits. I actually just had a conversation just this morning with our new talent management vice president, and we were looking at our succession planning, at our pipeline, and those kinds of things. The talent scorecards were a big part of that. And then to be able to say, well, where did we actually, fall short, and what systems preclude us from success or allow us to continue that level of failure or that level of a deficit.
So basically, what systems are preventing us from being 100% racist? Let's look at our scorecard. Oh, well, our racial demographics aren't in the right place we want to be. What systems could be preventing us from getting there? What practices are obstacles towards us achieving our goals? What is stopping us from being 100% racially or gender discriminatory? How can we break down those barriers? I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. This is decidedly of many of the DEI things I've looked at over time. I think this might be one of the most remarkable ones, right up there with Accenture for just laying it out, unfiltered, no diplomatic language. Just we are practicing racial discrimination in our hiring. Full stop. I don't know how else you interpret this.
So at Allstate, we really do believe in how the systems are leading humans and how the systems will support appropriate and successful behavior. I wish I could say as a diversity person that we will change hearts and minds like this. It takes a long time to change hearts and minds. And so one of the things that you can do as a leader is to look at the systems that exist. How can you create more equitable systems so that people even learn through those systems and it eventually can impact more hearts and minds?
Equitable. Yes, equity as in equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. And that is what she's working towards with her dashboard of race. Yeah.
That's something that we do see when it comes to whether or not the communities being served are reflected in some of the corporate boards or management positions, that pipeline. Talk about what you've seen in that space and what you'd like to see in terms of improvements from here.
Okay, we're coming up at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to keep going. There's about 10 minutes left of this, so maybe I might go to 2 hours. I'm just fascinated to know what she's going to say next. She convinced me about halfway through her talk. I just all of a sudden like, oh, okay. Now I'm very curious to know what's going to be the next thing that she confesses to.
Yeah. So, we're really proud at Allstate. We've got 54% of our overall employee population identify as racial or ethnic, female.
Oh, okay. So there are 54% of your workforce population that identifies female. Okay, so females are the majority in your company. All right. Is that just on the basis of their skills and merits and expertise? Or was that engineered?
47% is racial or ethnically diverse. So
47% is not white, you mean? Okay, you're proud of this. You're proud of these metrics. Gender, race. How about education? How about work experience? Something? No? Okay, but you're proud of those things. You're proud. Racial pride. Let's just consider that one for a second, shall we?
Pretty good numbers. 71% of our directors and above identify as either a female, a person of color, or as a woman of color. So that's good.
Keep going. Keep going.
But the thing is, those numbers, as I mentioned earlier, the 47 and the 52, a lot of our diversity is at our lower levels, right? So this is what happens at a lot of companies, especially predominantly white institutions, where you have great diversity numbers, but they're in kind of your independent contributor or your lower manager levels.
Oh, and by the way, because the corollary to that, of course, is if you're male and white, if you make up those statistics, that's bad, right? Female, racially diverse, good. Anything on the opposite side of those two things, bad. Just so you know, as we venture further and further into, again, there is such a lawsuit just waiting here.
To your point, Rochelle, if the diversity isn't in decision-making areas like our board, our officers, our C-suite level, then it doesn't really mirror the communities in which we live, work, and serve. For us, we find the X factor, like where a lot of our diversity at the lower levels, the higher that you go, the more white and male that it gets, and the older, like in terms of the generations it gets. We see that X happen right at about the manager or senior manager level. That's what we're looking at right there. It's like, what happens there? Why do either people leave? Why are we not promoting? What are we not doing right? Where either we lose that or we're not promoting the appropriate, talent, or we're not developing, that talent.
The appropriate talent. You have said nothing about talent. You're using talent as an umbrella word for racial demographics we approve of, or the gender we approve of. That's not got nothing to do with talent. This lady is amazing. Okay, yeah, definitely. Next Sunday, unless I come up with a better idea, I'm going to find that congressional hearing footage somewhere on C-SPAN or otherwise. I am dying to know what she said in front of Congress.
We do have a goal to match the communities in which we live, work, and serve. Right now, we're doing a really good job of our managers and below match the nation and match the market. We are a mass market corporation, but above, we don't match the nation.
Match on, I know I don't need to ask, but what do you mean match? Right. So if you're in a city that has X percentage Black people and X percentage Hispanic people and X percentage white people, you're going to make sure that your local branch, the workforce, matches the community. So you have racial quotas, racial and gender quotas. That is what you're saying you're doing. Okay, it's your show.
And so we have to do a better job. And so again, having these transparent conversations is important.
I all kidding aside for a second, I am glad she's having this transparent conversation. I appreciate an actual transparent conversation. She's being very transparent, very much so. I do appreciate it.
And obviously recognizing that is the first step versus sort of putting your head in the sand. And we know that Suzanne highlighted the business case for this when it comes to things like racial disparities, saying that the US economy could be $8 trillion larger by 2050 if we eliminated racial disparities in areas such as health, education, incarceration.
I hear that a lot. You know, our economy could grow by $5 zillion if only we did this, 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 and this. You know, obviously. Okay, so there is a monetary incentive now to discriminating on the basis of race. Can we all just take a moment and think about the historical implications of that statement? Just because we have history brought up to us all the time about what this is supposed to be addressing, and yet doesn't it seem to all come back around to the exact same motivations as what fueled the evil of the past?
And employment, that information coming from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Talk about the business case, not just recruiting, but also retaining a workforce that doesn't just come in, but feels welcome and actually wants to stay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're a white male, then obviously you're a detriment just on the basis of what you are. Never mind your professional experience, your education, anything you might bring to the table otherwise. But we already know that you're a not wanted because we can see it.
Absolutely. So, you know, there's a lot of studies out there, and I could go on and on and on, right? But there's a lot of studies out there that show that your revenue grows in the amounts of 19 to 33% if you are able to retain and promote and, you know, have these diverse individuals, especially in your leadership groups.
Are you sure it has anything to do with the skin color or their genitals, or does it have to do with their expertise and their tenure in a particular business or business sector? Are you sure it's not actual skill and ability? Are you sure that you're not doing a correlation without causation there? Are you sure about that?
Your market can grow also. Companies who are more diverse, especially in their leadership, see a growth of about 33,000 customers a year in comparison to only 22,000 customers a year if you have diversity at your leadership level. So that's huge.
Yeah, here's another question, given our previous set of speakers. If your leadership is of a particular type, and some companies will give you exclusive access to resources, connections, networking, and so on the basis of your type, is that actually reflective of an inherent benefit to your type? Or is that just another example of the benefits of racism? I have to ask the question because our speakers have put it in my mind. Thank you, Matt Barnes. This is fire, as the cool kids say. If I was a competing company, my ad campaign would be clips of this and asking, are you really in good hands? Yeah. How does Allstate value its customer base? What does Allstate value about its customer base, first and foremost? Well, that's a good question. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Yeah.
You know, some of the things as well, I prior to Allstate, I was at academic healthcare. And one of the things that I studied was around concordance. So what concordance means is the matching of race, gender, or language to your patient. So patient-provider concordance, right?
Okay.
I identify as Filipina. I've never had a Filipina provider. Never.
So you've inherently had lesser quality healthcare? What does your ethnicity have to do with your healthcare? I mean, if it was a language barrier, I could see that as a problem. If it was a massive cultural barrier, that might be a problem as well. I read an entire textbook in college about the Hmong culture and interactions with Western medicine from a I forget exactly what. I'm just going to, this is a glaring generalization, but essentially a tribal mystical based culture moving over to America, I think post-Vietnam War, and having to interact with Western medicine and the conflict between a much more shamanistic philosophy on medicine, health, and so on, with obviously Western technology and medicine. If you had something like that, I could see that as a problem as well. But what does your being or your identifying as Filipina, what detriments have you encountered on the basis of never having a Filipina provider?
I'm in my early 40s, and I've never had a Filipino provider. Can
So what?
you believe that?
I can believe it. So?
And
So wait, are you going to be that? There's a video out there from years ago where a lady's going to a doctor's office and she's demanding for a white physician. She doesn't want to see anyone other than a white physician. And people pass that video around as, look at this racist nut job. And I'll be like, yeah. So what? Do you scan your health providers first and foremost as well? I have to imagine you do. This is your job. This is your job.
that's not good, right?
If you say so, if you say that the race of every healthcare provider you've ever had is an inherent detriment to you, by all means, tell us more.
I can imagine, this is a really diverse room. I can imagine it if you see somebody who looks like you ought, like, just be real. You automatically are like, I trust you.
Oh, Jesus. Oh my God. Am I at a Klan rally or something? Listen to this lady.
Like, you're good, right? Your parents look like me, like we ate the same food, we grew up in the same, just automatically as humans, we go to those and we trust those that look like us.
If you say so, diversity, inclusion, equity lady. If keep going. You have a shovel for a tongue. Keep digging.
Right. In the field of safety and protection, which is what my field is in, that's important to us, right? You feel the most safe, you feel the most protected when people look like you, act like you, come from places like you. That's just an intrinsic human value.
Okay, so you don't trust anyone who doesn't look like you. You feel no kinship with anybody who doesn't look like you. You see someone not looking like you as an inherent detriment to your ability to be able to relate to them, trust them, and so on. Keep going.
Okay. And so we believe in that. And
Allstate believes in that. Okay, here it is, guys. Allstate believes in racial segregation of thought and comfort. Just so you know.
so that's why we feel it's really, really important, to have that at our highest, levels.
Right, at your highest levels. Okay, so if a white person looked at you and said, I don't trust you, you're too brown for me, you'd be fine with that. You would understand that. You'd be empathetic to that notion, right? Are you kidding? This is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Just for the candor. Because here's the thing. We all know that this kind of thinking is what's fueling this entire DEI diversity subset cult or whatever. It is just so rare to have somebody come out and have absolutely no filter, absolutely no hesitation. I have to respect her for that, in a way. In that way, I respect her. She's not couching it. She's not avoiding the issue like our previous speakers mentioned it about 3 times at the beginning and then just kind of like avoided it the entire time afterwards. This is something else.
And when you're trying to show the value of DEI to your key stakeholders, not just employees, but shareholders, customers, how do you do that? How do you really quantify that value for them?
Yeah, so we look at, of course, we look at loyalty, how many years our customers have been with us. We look at referral rates we consider our employees also to be, our consumers. So again, of course, retention. I will tell you, in all honesty, retention is also hard in this environment because many people will stay at a company right now, given the economic environment, because it is difficult, to keep moving in kind of a recessionary environment. But we also look at things like engagement scores, asking questions specifically about would you refer Allstate to a friend or family?
Not after this.
We also cut all of our employee data by demographics so that we're...
Oh, do you? I hadn't I hadn't thought that. I thought that was your whole dashboard scorecard.
Really honest with ourselves to say, compared to our majority population, whether it's white or male or white males, how is everyone else, kind of doing, right? So we're really using data to look and see whether we're being honest, with ourselves.
You're using quotas. Just say it. You're using racial and gender quotas in determining your hiring, promotion, and retention practices. She basically has already said it. I just want to hear her use the word quota once, maybe. That'd be nice.
Obviously, we've had a number of turning points over the last few years. You had 2020, you had George Floyd.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of companies making a lot of promises. Some ended up being performative. Others were sort of wondering, what do we actually see now? So when you think of how you would like companies to use these sorts of moments and how Allstate use these sorts of moments perhaps as a wake-up call, what do you think you would like other companies to do, having seen this, so that they're not seen as performative, but actually really making some changes that actually stick and make a difference?
Yeah. What can companies really do? Oh boy, given what she's already told us that they are doing, oh boy, what would you like to see other companies do?
So let me tell you, I joined Allstate only a year and a half ago, less than a year and a half ago.
Okay.
I promised myself in my career I would never join a company as their head of diversity after a crisis. I told myself I would never, and here I am. I did it.
Wow, so you're a hypocrite. I'm shocked.
Dang it. But here's the thing also that I really believe, for those of you who
Okay, well, since you've already thrown out your principles to us once already, you've already shown yourself to be absolutely contradictory in your own belief system about things. You vilified one set of practices while actually practicing the very thing that you're vilifying. Tell us what you do believe.
Lead diversity efforts or help to support diversity efforts. We in the diversity field, you are the smartest if you should never let a good crisis go to waste.
Oh, yes. Exploit the situation for your own personal gain. I told myself I'd never take on a job in the midst of a crisis. But, if somebody's going to offer me a paycheck in the midst of a crisis, well, it's all right.
And I am by no means trying to disrespect the Black Lives Matter movement or the death of George Floyd. But that was a moment for our country. That was a moment for our world.
And I certainly profited off of it, didn't I? It certainly pushed my message further than anything I could have ever done as an individual. And I jumped on that gravy train as soon as the offer came along. Wow. Okay. Tell me more.
It would be horrible to not leverage that opportunity or optimize on that opportunity to actually elevate conversations, right?
Yeah. Let's take advantage of an absolute tragedy over someone's death and the political firestorm, literal and figurative, that took place afterwards to get my agenda across, to make a buck.
So that's one of the reasons why when Allstate came and talked to me, I was like, what? I was like, I told myself I would never do this, but I'll come over and I'll join at this time. So, so one thing is be really smart about a couple things.
Well, okay, I'll give her this. She was smart to strike while the iron was hot. I mean, insofar as self-enrichment is concerned, she made the exact right choice. The market for diversity and inclusion consultants, officers, and so on is just so hot right now. And it was definitely at the hottest right after George Floyd. So as far as smart moves are concerned, no, she did it. She did it. And so many others that have, when it comes to just personal enrichment, regardless of what it is they're actually pushing, it's a smart move. The market will sustain it. Nice work if you can get it, kind of thing. So on that score, no, she was not dumb. She took advantage of the situation for her own benefit. Good for her, sort of.
Know what your company's identity around diversity is. Procter & Gamble did a really nice job about saying unapologetically, we will talk about Black lives, we'll talk about Black beauty, we'll talk about Black wealth. Wow. They unapologetically chose that as their identity of their diversity identity. Target does a really nice job around multicultural families and kiddos with disabilities. Unapologetically, they stay in that space.
multicultural families and kids with disabilities. Okay. Yeah. Were Target stores immune from backlash from Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots by any chance? I seem to remember more than a few Target stores being trashed, burned down, or otherwise destroyed. But okay.
So what happens is when crisis occurs
Yes.
or when the world falls apart,
Yeah.
they stay in that space because they have unapologetically chosen that as their identity. If a company hasn't done that, then what happens is when things fall apart, you're like, yeah, okay, we'll give money over here, we'll go over here, or yeah. And then what happens is you play oppression Olympics. That
What? Oh my.
is really rough on an organization, and it is at a high risk for an organization.
Okay, so when you are stratifying who gets the benefits from your company in real estate, advertising, employment, retention, promotion, executive positions on the basis of race and gender, and then vilifying anybody who doesn't fit into those things, you're not playing oppression Olympics. You're not, you have a scorecard. You have a scorecard in your own company on the basis of race and gender. What are you talking about? You get into oppression Olympics. Good gravy.
At Allstate, we have chosen to be a part of the Black Lives Matter push, the idea of supporting African American and Black jobs and the provision of wealth, the disparity of wealth for women. And we're working on other disparities around people with disabilities and veterans.
Whoa. Again, you come in at the end with veterans and now people with disabilities. Factors that they have no control over or are actual markers of merit, as though that somehow forgives everything else. It somehow blunts it, makes the rest of it okay. This lady is something. Man, golly, gee whiz, Batman.
We have unapologetically chosen that as our identity.
Yeah. I'm glad you've unapologetically chosen that, because with no apologies, no sense of remorse whatsoever, if this footage ever gets used in evidence against Allstate, the defense attorneys will have little room to maneuver.
Will we get pushback? Of course we will,
like by, federal law, the ACLU, if they ever actually get back to what they're supposed to be doing. Lawyers groups, other civil rights groups, that kind of thing.
But a company I would encourage you to stand in your identity, figure out what that is, figure out how that is complementary and adjacent to your brand.
And also is completely situated in either racial and or gender identity, so that you vilify anything that falls outside of those demographics.
And then go. Go. We talked about be intentional. Be intentional about what you're doing.
Yes,
I know we're running out of time. I just quickly want to add about the Second Chance program as we look at 2 open jobs for every person who's able to work in this country. If you could.
The Second Chance program. Okay.
Just quickly tell us about the Second Chance program and what that actually does to a workforce.
Yeah, the Second Chance program, for those of you, we talked about it earlier, is essentially a recidivism program. So this idea of looking at individuals who have a background either in jail, prison, or a felony, and thinking about that. So many of you already know, so Allstate is part of the finance and insurance industry. Historically, the finance and insurance industry does not allow individuals with felonies or prison backgrounds into our workplace. Right. And Allstate said, why not? Why not?
Well, there are some, reasonable concerns there, but it would depend on the type of felony, how long it's been, what their record has been in the interim, and so on. And now that one I don't necessarily have a problem with. One of the diversity panel videos I did a long time ago, they had like 4 ladies on the stage, and 3 of them kept talking the usual diversity stuff, and then they come to the 4th lady and the company that she represented, and she said, well, when we consider diversity, we're looking at the diversity of the people that come into the company, and our program of assessing convicted felons or people with criminal backgrounds, because we don't believe that people, just because you have a conviction, necessarily exclude you from consideration for a job. And she went through this very reasonable, very inspiring little description of what her company does and how they do it and why they do it. And if I remember correctly, she even talked about their results. Now, obviously, it's all, potentially just lip service or anything. But as compared to the other three people on the panel, she was actually talking about someone's merit. Merit in that, yes, they committed a crime in the past, but what has their record been since? What have their efforts been to reform themselves and get a better life since? So the Second Chance program, at least on a sentimental basis, let's say, sounds like a good idea to me. You have to be careful about it, obviously. You have to be selective, but it's also selective on the basis of merit, I would hope. But let's find out.
We have this rule, but certainly there would be opportunities for us, to look at individuals like this. And so we're actually folding that into the way that we're thinking about our work. Allstate is moving more towards a capabilities-based model.
Are you? It could have fooled me. It sounds like capability is at least a secondary, if not tertiary consideration. Because first it's race, then it's gender. Capability? Oh, okay. Tell me more about this novel idea of evaluating people on their skills and experience.
87% of our jobs do not require a bachelor's degree. We are in a unique position as Allstate to look at capabilities-based hiring and capabilities-based promotions, and recidivism programs are a part of that.
Are you? Because you've been glorifying nothing but a racial or gender scorecard dashboard the entire time. Now we're at capability. Oh, but we're at capability when it comes to people who have previous convictions. But if you're just a regular person, this lady this has been something else. We're right at the end here.
I know we'll have to leave it there, but it's been a fantastic conversation.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do not disagree. That was a fantastic conversation. That was an eye-opening conversation in so many ways. Next Sunday stream, unless I come up with something else or something else comes up, I'm going to try to find her testimony in front of Congress, or her company's testimony in front of Congress. I mean, it might just be supplementary to what she's already confessed to in this video, but I am direly curious to know what she said on the stand, so to speak, in testimony. I did not expect that, guys. I did not expect that. That has to be one of the most blatant declarations of racism in business practices that I've heard recently. You get bits and pieces from different people talking, like our previous speakers. They kind of, they talk about a little bit at the beginning, but then they don't mention it for the rest of the entire talk, as though they're ashamed of it. As also as if perhaps some part in the back of their mind knows that they're treading on sketchy territory. But this lady had no problem at all, and it's something else. Representing a major insurance corporation, that's something else. Put a pin in this one. I might be coming back to Allstate at some point. Thank you, Mike R., for the happy, smiley dog cat fox. Oh, dog cat fox.
Wowie, wow, wow.
That was a ranting monkey dog cat fox. Thank you, Mike, so much. Let's see here. Let me got all my buttons to click. Get a couple of comments from you guys, and then I'm going to wrap things up because I'm obviously already over time. Spoonie the Rebel, off topic, but good news. I've been sober for a year now. Congratulations, Spoonie. Everybody give Spoonie a pat on the back there, either in the chat or send good mental vibes. I have friends and family members in the past who have struggled with such things, and I know that it's not an easy thing to do, and every day is a challenge. And so congratulations on that. Keep it going. Don't stop. Bit by bit, day by day. It's all you can do, but each day, one more added on is a success. So congratulations on that. Let's see. Scrappy, glad I made this one live. I tell you, once in a while, something happens. Renovicio, I would employ a violent felon if he were to be made work alongside this woman. No. Okay. just as a reference point, I obviously have serious issues with this lady's philosophy and her business intentions and practices. But outside of that, I bear no ill will. I'm just morbidly curious to know what else she said before Congress and elsewise. If in this little casual conversation, she lets out all this amazing material about what she's doing at Allstate and what Allstate is allowing her to do. That's something else. Let's see. Scanner Daphne, man, I am distancing myself from Allstate. I tell you, the considerations that she's talking about here in property and advertising and employment and everything else, when she's talking about making it a cultural thing, well, she's talking about making it automatic. She's talking about essentially guiding and educating and brainwashing people into thinking about these things without having to be told. She's talking about manufacturing racists in the company and sexists. That's what she's talking about. We shouldn't have to have this program. I should be out of a job. People should just be, racist and sexist without having to have a program around it. I mean, does she even understand the implications of what she's saying? Does it even occur to her to look at the comparisons between redlining and what her own company is doing with giving away office space? Okay? What is at the core of each of those initiatives? And how does either one smell better than the other in light of that fact? It's something else. It is remarkable. It really is remarkable. A couple more here, and then I'm going to wrap up, as it were. Let's see, who else we got here? Okay, I'm looking. Yeah, you guys were talking about stuff ahead of time. Scanner Daphne, are you employing criminals in financial insurance? I mean, it depends. Again, if someone's had a clean criminal record for 10 years or more, that's usually a good metric for giving somebody a shot, at least at an entry-level position, something like that. Some companies have a lower metric for that, some a higher. It all depends. Depends on what you're convicted of. If you're convicted of stealing a bike, and it ended up being a felony because of certain things, well, so who knows? But like I say, on the surface, I don't immediately discount that idea. If I cared enough to look, I'd have to wonder about how they go about employing it, or what restrictions or prerequisites they have for considering someone for a job. But again, get into that much detail. Let's see. Yvonne Solomon, hell no, don't include my disabilities in this. I'd be curious to know what they do or what considerations they make beyond what is legally required of them, right? Beyond the ADA. What does that mean? What does it have to do with anything? And also veterans. Like, what beyond legal or statutory requirements does the company do to help veterans? I mean, there are certain things out there the veterans just have access to as a matter of their status on a federal level. What is the company doing beyond that? What additional things they do? I'd be curious to know, even though it sure feels like it's put there completely as insulation for criticism. If they're doing it, they're doing it. If the end result is the end result, am I buying a drill bit for the drill bit, or am I buying a drill bit for the hole it creates, right? So anyway, Alice Morgan, U.S. Committee on Financial Services, founded on their website. Scribe. Thank you, Alice. If you have a link to that, please let me know, put it in the chat, or tweet it to me. I might make that next week's topic for the Sunday stream, but we'll see. Who knows? A lot can happen in a week. Like, I don't know, a primary election. Yeah. So, by the way, programming note, Tuesday, currently planned, granted that he's in shape to do it after falling down the stairs again and hitting his head. I am scheduled to be on the Ranting Monkey channel to watch as the returns come in on the 2022 primary elections. So watch Ranting Monkey, or I should say Angry Monkey 422 on Twitter. That's Ranting Monkey's cousin. Or follow me on Twitter. You can see my Twitter handle there at the bottom, @scribe_light. I am not a blue check mark. I don't know that I ever will pay for one, but We'll see. Otherwise, you can find me here again next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of TED Excellence, where I'll once again take a look at an off-brand TED Talk for education and enjoyment. I call it Education. Sure, why not? Everybody, thank you so much for joining me for this amazing presentation, specifically from Allstate. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. Moderators, thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved and so supportive of each other that you really have very little to do. Again, thanks for joining me. Hope you have a good rest of your Sunday and your weekend. Hope you have a good week ahead of you. Hope to see you on Ranting Monkey's channel for election night coverage with me Tuesday night. I'm assuming around, say, 5 p.m. Pacific, maybe a little earlier, because I think the returns start coming in at 8 on the East Coast. And with that, everybody, I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon. And I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.